Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai. Hare Krishna and welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class. We continue to read in the 4th canto, chapter 24, entitled Chanting the Song Sung by Lord Shiva. Text 26. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tan Prapanarti Haro Bhagavan Dharmavatsalaha Dharmagyan Shila Sampanan Pritan Uvacha Ha Satan Prapanarti Haro Satan Prapanarti Haro Bhagavan Dharmavatsala Bhagavan Dharmavatsala Dharmagyan Shila Sampanan Dharmagyan Shila Sampanan Pritan Uvachaha Pritan Uvachaha Satan Prapanarti Haro Bhagavan Dharmavatsala Dharmagyan Shila Sampanan Pritan Uvachaha Satan Prapanarti Haro Bhagavan Dharmavatsala Dharmagyan Shila Sampanan Pritan Uvachaha Satan Prapanarti Haro Bhagavan Dharmavatsala Dharmagyan Shila Sampanam Prita Pritan Uvachaha. Satan Prapanarti Haro. Bhagavan Dharma Vatsala. Dharma Gyan Shila Sampanan. Prita Pritan Uvachaha. Vaishnavis? Satan Prapanarti Haro. Bhagavan Dharma Vatsala. Dharma Gyan Shila Sampanan. Prita Pritan Uvachaha. Saha. Lord Shiva. Tan. Them. Prapana Arti Hara. One who drives away all kinds of dangers. Bhagavan, the Lord. Dharma Vatsalaha, very much fond of religious principles. Dharma Gyan, persons who are aware of religious principles. Shila Sampanan, very well behaved. Prita, being pleased. Pritan, of very gentle behavior. Uvacha, talked with them. Ha, in the past. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Lord Shiva became very pleased with the Prachetas because generally Lord Shiva is the protector of pious persons and persons of gentle behavior. Being very much pleased with the princes, he began to speak as follows. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu or Krishna, is known as Bhaktavatsala, and herein we find Lord Shiva described as Dharmavatsala. Of course, the word Dharmavatsala refers to a person who lives according to religious principles. That is understood. Nonetheless, these two words have additional significance. Sometimes Lord Shiva has to deal with persons who are in the modes of passion and ignorance. Such persons are not always very much religious and pious in their activities. But since they worship Lord Shiva for some material profit, they sometimes obey the religious principles. As soon as Lord Shiva sees that his devotees are following religious principles, he blesses them. The Prachetas, sons of Prajnabarhi, were naturally very pious and gentle, and consequently Lord Shiva was immediately pleased with them. Lord Shiva could understand that the princes were sons of Vaishnavas, and as such Lord Shiva offered prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead as follows. Om Jnanatimidandasya Gnanjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Garamayam Dadati Swabrantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vagisha Yasya Vadhane Lakshmir Yasya Chavakshasi Yasyaste Hridaye Samvit Tam Narasimham Maham Bhaje Pralada Hridayaladam Bhakta Vityavidaram Sharatinduruchim Vande Parindra Vandanam Harim. The verse once more. Lord Shiva became very pleased with the Prachetas because generally Lord Shiva is the protector of pious persons and persons of gentle behavior. Being very much pleased with the princes, he began to speak as follows. I would like to focus in today's class on those qualities that are praised here: gentle behavior and piety as something that is obviously very pleasing to Lord Shiva. And we know Lord Shiva is a great Vaishnava and a powerful plenary expansion of the Lord himself. Jagannath Baladev Subhacha Devi Ki Jai, Shishi Gaunitai Ki Jai. And one of the names of Lord Shiva is it Ashutosh? the one who's quickly or very, is pleased quickly. Even if a person is generally not of a very good behavior, not very into religious principles, and not very gentle, still he sees very little endeavor for religious principles or piety, and blesses them. Maybe one very drastic example we could see in Ravana, who was also a great devotee of Shiva. He used to worship Lord Shiva because many demons feel attracted to Lord Shiva and his powers. And although he was very much offending Lord Shiva when he was traveling around in the three worlds trying to conquer and provoke everyone, challenge everyone, he also came across Mount Kailash, and then Nandi in a strange form stopped him. Nandi looked a bit like weird, like mixture of a monkey and a half of a bull kind of type of thing. And Ravan really very much dismissed him. And he started to shake the rock that was in the way. And on the rock up there was Lord Shiva with Parvati, and Parvati was shaken, and she kind of almost fell off the lap of Lord Shiva. And she cursed him, of course. And anyway, first, what happened then is Ravana wanted with his many arms, with his 20 arms actually, when he manifested his form, he wanted to lift the rock in order to make way for himself. But then Lord Shiva with his toe just stepped on it, and it became unbearably heavy. So Ravana got stuck. He couldn't lift it. And also all the other demons with him were helpless. They'd say, okay, what can we do? This is Lord Shiva. No one is more powerful than him. But then one of his generals or ministers reminded him, you remember you learned certain hymns, certain prayers to worship Lord Shiva, and you should remember that, and you should worship Shiva. And he did so in his condition, stuck to the rock. And Shiva was a bit not so quickly pleased. It took him 100 years he made him chant 100 years or something like that. And at the end, Ravan got free. And here we can see someone like who has not a very good character, is not very gentle, and also, what to speak of pious, he even felt entitled to a blessing. He was not just like, oh, glad I got off, I became free from. He said, no, now when you are pleased, you must give me a blessing. And he asked for his weapon, and Lord Shiva also gave it at the end. So Shiva is a very generous personality who. Yes, also gives his blessings to people. Sometimes questionable blessings, if you see the scriptures. But here Lord Shiva is praising the Vaishnavas, the Prachetas, who were very advanced devotees of the Lord, and the behavior they exhibited, their way, their nature, their whole mentality. And this was something that gave rise to Lord Shiva's natural inclination to be blessing, or to give blessings. He was very positively affected. We can also see that if we have people around us that we feel they manifest or they represent so many good qualities, or that they impress us by their character. Maybe because they're gentle, maybe they're caring, maybe they are very self-disciplined, steady, and so on. Then naturally we feel like inclined to praise them, or like to at least respect them, and so on. So it's a natural effect. The way we are affects others in terms of, are they positively inclined toward us, or rather not so positively inclined toward us. Of course, a person can be envious, and despite good qualities, despite gentleness, and despite a person following religious principles, still there might be envy, there might be inimical mood toward people. But nevertheless, still the effect of oneself being a character or being of good character is undisputed. We see that also in Srila Prabhupada himself as a self-realized soul. He attracted so many people simply by the way he was, by his purity, as we say. Purity is the force if one has a pure character. What does pure mean? One is actually free from the lower modes of nature, at least. Or to speak of further having transcended material conceptions of life, being free from all types of anarthas that arise from the material conception of life. And in this way, this is what pious activity actually means, that we follow principles of religion, of true spirituality, that elevate us above the lower modes of nature, as we say, passion and ignorance. That we don't stay in that bodily platform, that we don't stay on the level of the senses and mind and ego and so on, that we rise above, that we become less self-centered and more serving, something like that. And speaking of religious principles and how they are connected to gentle behavior, I would like to address a few principles that are highlighted in the Upadeshamrita and also in the Bhagavad Gita when it comes to how do Vaishnavas or souls with transcendental knowledge, how do they communicate, not just with others, but also with themselves. Often when we speak of like dealing with people, relationships, or like how Vaishnavas treat each other, we look at, okay, how do I treat others, how do others treat me? And that's certainly very important. At the same time, it is also important to look at how do I treat myself. In my work as therapist, this is more prominent perhaps than in another field of work, but there's simply this comes up often, because despite people might treat me very respectful and appreciate me and being nice, but I might be very harsh or devaluing myself and so on due to certain reasons. But also we internalize what we receive from others as behavior, words. You know that sometimes someone says some maybe harsh, critical word to you, and it stays with you, and you have it in you, and sometimes you remember these harsh words over and over, and you feel bad. At the same time, you also maybe find you remember someone very kindly and genuinely appreciated you and encouraged you, and also these words might stay with you, and they form the way you think about yourself and form the way you behave also with yourself, how you deal with success and failure and so on. So I would like to take a look at that, this type of communication, which we can also call non-violent communication, because if you speak of communication in the mode of goodness, this is like free or like is higher than the mode of passion and ignorance. And when it comes to violence, we talk about it because Lord Shiva was, for example, once confronted with Daksha, who spoke very violently against Lord Shiva, like insulting, and yes, that was very painful, led even up to the point that Daksha's daughter Sati left her body because of the insults being thrown from the side of Daksha to Shiva. So not a very gentle person, and in this sense also not very much grounded in religious principles. So Sri Rupa Goswami, right at the beginning of his Upadeshamrita, highlights principles for spiritual advancement, starting with control of senses. And the first sense he mentions is Vacho Vegam. Vacho relates to the tongue in regards to the urge to speak. He says Vacho Vegam, then Manasa Krodha Vegam, that there are also urges of the mind, all kinds of thoughts and feelings. And then he particularly mentions Krodha, Manasa Krodha Vegam, that the mind has urges, but the anger is particularly highlighted somehow. That because anger arises from unsatisfied lust, but also is connected to pride and so on. And then he says, Etan vegan yuvesha heta dhiraha. One cannot just be free of these urges. He says you must tolerate dhira. You might experience them, anger and so on, and all these urges, the urge to speak. And then he said, Vachvegam, the tongue is mentioned twice in its capacity to speak, but also wanting to taste. And he says, like, if one learns to tolerate those urges, means to not follow up on them. Srila Prabhupada sometimes gives the example of itching and scratching. You might have an itch, and if you can tolerate the itch and not scratch It would be like a success. And similarly, he says all the kind of sensual urges there, he compares them to itching. And if you find it is a very good analogy actually, because it's something. It's really like that. It bothers you, because sometimes, let's say you're peaceful for a while, and suddenly one or many of your senses want something, or your mind. And then you think, oh damn, and you just become unpeaceful. You know, and dira means peaceful, and adira means you're not anymore peaceful. So, and then it's about like the practice of learning to tolerate urges, or to at least kind of bypass them somehow. And the urge to speak is very relevant, because by speech we also create something. We see the power of words is also in other places in the creation reports relevant. In the Bible we have in the Genesis beginning, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and then also it's the saying the Word was God. But the start is like in the beginning was the Word. From there things have been created. And also if you look at our creation reports, Lord Brahma created the secondary creation through mantra words. He received the Gopal mantra. And there are descriptions or like quotations in the Hari Bhakti Vilas where Brahma is speaking and telling how he used different parts of these mantras to create the sun, to create this planet, to create this thing and that thing from these mantras. So through the sound he manifested. You know, and we have in German also the saying on the other hand, like sich Kopf und Kragen reden. You say, I don't know how you say that in English, but that your words might bring you very much into trouble. Words can be uplifting, words can be very destructive also. And let's see, one example also is Dhruva Maharaj. You know, the insulting words of his mother very much affected him, up to the point he left home and performed severe austerities in the forest, based on being insulted. Right, so the words have power. This was not a good situation in the first place, but it led to ultimately, of course, a good outcome. And another example is King Vena. King Vena was very disrespectful, not gentle, and not grounded in religious principles, and very much offended the Brahmins. And the Brahmins were able to kill King Vena with words. It's described there were high pinching sounds of hum, some hum mantra, some word like that killed King Vena. Words are very powerful. If you can utter them, sound is a very powerful element. Later on we hear also how the mother of King Vena used mantras to preserve the body. So more like, again, words as a maintaining principle, creating. So we should not underestimate the power of words and how they can be constructive and how they can be destructive. Why is anger, for example, so much highlighted in this verse? Rupa Goswami is telling us when he says controlling the urges, Vajravegam, Manasa, Krodavegam, because anger is a very destructive force. And things said in anger can be very devastating for others. You know? We say in German you have this word Kränkung. In English you would probably use humiliation, something like hurt, harm, like that, something really hurts you. And that's a form of violence. You know, sometimes we think with violence we think of physical violence, right? Okay. But silence also has subtle aspects, right? The way we deal with each other. Simply a behavior, and if we could go so far to say, if I, let's say, constantly ignore a person, it also could be a form of violence if I intend to make this person anyway not feel welcomed, not feel valuable, and so on. So let's have this in mind, that violence can be very subtle. You know, violence. Let's define it as an intent, conscious or subconscious, to harm. You know, on whatever platform. And Rupa Goswami is saying one must really get control of this urge if one wants to advance spiritually. So why is that? Because anger is related to the mode of passion at best, but also related to the mode of ignorance. Because it increases also the bodily identification. I'm this type of person, I'm entitled to that, and don't you know who I am? And so based on bodily identification. And also in many relationships, also between men and women, or like between family members, children and parents, and so on, violence is a topic. Generally between people, whenever people come together, there is. But the more personal or like more intimate the relationship is, violence can take different measures. But also between nations, we see that based on nationality and religion, people behave very violent toward each other. Not necessarily, of course, this is the extreme form that they kill each other, but with words. It starts usually with words. A war could be started based on someone's insult. We see also in the Mahabharata, sometimes Kshatriyas are very sensitive about what has been said. And if something has been said that was not okay, it could mean someone has to die. We sometimes might be kind of impressed, yes, chivalrous and so. But think about it, it's quite drastic as well. You know, a wrong word can get you killed, right? So because also from words, it follows a whole experience within the mind that leads to, usually feeling hurt leads to feeling angry, leading to maybe you hurting someone else. You know, often people that hurt others are hurt themselves. All right? So we can see it's not, in some way, we must first of all check at where do we come from when we use words, when we are in anger and so on. And to rather ask, what do I need in this moment? What is behind the anger? You know, usually there's a sense of I need some healing, perhaps, or I need an how to say, an apology, or I need whatever I need. You know, and that would be the sattvic approach. Sattva means, Krishna defines that in the Bhagavad Gita. Sattva is the mode of purity. It is brings enlightenment and is superior to the other modes. It can counteract the reactions of the lower modes. So, and also if you talk of communication, sattvic communication, that we first of all become aware, because awareness is sattva, contrary to ignorance, which is unawareness. Right? If I just follow the manas or krodha vegam, just the urges, without asking what's behind them, then I'm usually acting in the mode of passion and ignorance. Right? But if I can see with sattva, like seeing what is behind that I can also understand dynamics that I might get myself into, that I might regret later. So this is the first step, that we check, that we become aware of these urges and control our urge to speak. Not every word, even if we are right with something, doesn't mean that it's productive in the moment to insist to be right. Right? This is the other part, that I can be right without having to be right. In a conflict, let's say, their values, raw understandings. Let's say men, women, right? In marriages, woman is supposed to be like that, man like that, and then there are different values. And based on a shastric statement, you could be right, but you could also be wrong at the same time, because in this moment, maybe your what you are right about is not what is needed at this moment. You know, you could. How to say? A Vaishnava, as it said here, the word gentle is used. Gentle is like being rather, say soft. Or what does he say here? No, he doesn't define it particularly. So okay, maybe I get a bit later. I lost a bit my point, but I will get back to it. And also, let someone else who asks about the way, how does a self-realized soul speak? How does he behave? Because communication is also behavior. Is Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita? In the second chapter, in text 54, Arjuna is asking Krishna, How does a person who is situated in transcendence act like? How does he speak? How does he talk? How does he walk? And so on. And Krishna gives answers. And also, of course, the great acharyas have been given purports on that. So I would like to read you from 254, what Srila Prabhupada comments on the verse. The verse goes, Arjuna said, O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak? And what is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk? As there are symptoms for each and every man in terms of his particular situation, similarly, one who is Krishna conscious has a particular nature, talking, walking, thinking, feeling, etc. As a rich man has his symptoms by which he is known as a rich man, as a diseased man has his symptoms by which he is known as diseased, or as a learned man has his symptoms, so a man in transcendental consciousness of Krishna has specific symptoms in various dealings. One can know his specific symptoms from the Bhagavad Gita. Most important is how the man in Krishna consciousness speaks. For speech is the most important quality of any man. It is said that a fool is undiscovered as long as he does not speak. And certainly a well-dressed fool cannot be identified unless he speaks. But as soon as he speaks, he reveals himself at once. The immediate symptom of a Krishna-conscious man is that he speaks only of Krishna and of matters relating to him. Other symptoms then automatically follow as stated below. So let's read this one sentence again. Most important is how the man in Krishna consciousness speaks, for speech is the most important quality of any man. Right? Because it's also said, language reflects our consciousness. So we can see if someone is tends to be not gentle, not truthful, maybe also dishonest, or that means simply not authentic. You pretend to, oh no, everything is fine, I'm okay, although you boil inside. It's about the speech reveals where you are at internally, right? Also in conflict situations, and if you're prone to anger, to insult, to make others feel small and use harsh words and angry language, then that reveals that you're very much affected by the mode of passion. And if you say things that even don't make sense and you just try to, be right or dominate the situation, although your arguments are not valid, then you're in a mode of ignorance as well. Right? Sattva would mean to be, for example, able to admit when you feel also weak, or when you feel you don't know something, and so on. Instead of trying to be right and trying to be strong where you are actually not. So this is humility, to acknowledge, okay, here am I, this is where I stand, this is what's going on for me. And not fending off all kinds of truths that are within myself, and try to, in this way, because this is violence towards oneself. You fight against yourself. If you treat yourself with the attitude, okay, I always have to be strong, for example, or I'm not allowed to this or this and that, like a lot of, self-limitation. Very in German you have the word streng. How you say it in English? Stern. So very tough with yourself, push yourself and pass a lot of judgment on yourself, for example. That's a form of violence toward yourself. It's not there. I'm not saying there's no place of judgment. Of course, sometimes you have to judge situations, and there is moral right and wrong. But what happens often, if you're very harsh and stern with ourselves, we tend to be that also with others in a certain way. Sometimes, of course, we might be the opposite. I'm very harsh and stern with me, but with others I'm very tolerant and patient. Could also be. But if we look at it, violence is not just from us to others, but also from us to ourselves. And it might reflect then back in in situations where we are challenged by others, and then we treat them as we are used to treat us. Yeah. So in here Prabhupada points out the speech is the most important quality of a man, and again let's relate that vacho vegam manasa krodha vegam. Right? And the prachetas are being praised here for their gentle behavior and their being situated in religious principles, because people who are truly Krishna conscious, what they talk about Krishna or relate topics related to Krishna. Doesn't mean that they don't bother to talk about necessities of daily life. Of course they also have to talk about that because we need to, but their actual interest, that's where their heart is at, that's Krishna consciousness, Krishna and the philosophy, and that's what they're concerned talking about. And it said, Prabhupada also points out one Vaishnava quality is being grave or silent. He doesn't even have to talk. Vaishnava also says if sometimes it's rather better to not speak. It says, Prabhupada defines it in Nectar of Devotion, silence means to always think of self-realization. To be thoughtful, to be introspective, and it's also a powerful communication tool. And Krishna gives also, if you talk of religious principles, he gives us a religious principle in regards to speech. In 1715, quotes a verse I very much like to refer to, where he lists items, I think 5 items that consist or that represent the austerity of speech. Anudveka karam vacham satyam priyam hitam chayat swadhyaya prasanam chaiva vanmayam tapochyate. Non-agitating speech is the first. Anudvega karam vakyam. That you do not agitate others with what you say. At least not intentionally. If you unintentionally agitate someone, okay, what to do? But of course it goes for intention. Srila Prabhupada gives the example. If you're a preacher and you have someone who is not willing to accept you as a teacher or take instruction from you, you should not try to instruct the person. This will just lead to conflict. Satyam, truthful. So we are wanted to speak the truth. So it means to be honest, to be genuine, but also stand behind what we believe, for example. If you take the field of preaching, sometimes preaching becomes dishonest. Out of the maybe idea, would this really attract this person? Can they really take it? Or do I stand behind it? At certain things. So that we also say, how truthful am I also in my presentation, let's say, of Krishna consciousness. The other thing is, how truthful am I in my relationships? Am I really genuine? Do I really speak my mind? Do I really say how I feel and it's true? And so on. Can I acknowledge mistakes? Can I acknowledge weaknesses and faults? That would be truthful. Priyam, this is what also here Lord Shiva is, and this word is also mentioned here. Prita, being pleased, and pritan, of very gentle behavior, and priya is pleasing. So that our speech shall be pleasing, and this is often a big topic. What does that mean? I mean, how can you be truthful and pleasing? Because often honesty is related to kind of you say unpleasant things, and the art is to say the unpleasant without being unpleasant. So it's easier said than done, but that's the challenge. What does it need for that? It's actually the motivation, like everything, the motivation behind it counts. If my motivation is based on also of genuine interest or in this person's well-being, in German you say wohlwollend, someone you want the welfare of other. Srila Prabhupada scientist letters, you're ever a well-wisher. If your attitude is well-wishing, I mean generally, not just you think, but I mean well, but I don't do well. it's another story. But like that, we have the intention to do well to others. So, hitam, then he says beneficial. Also very important consideration, is what I say beneficial? Or I have just the urge to speak? So also considering, when I say that, what will it create? That would be, again, go back, Vajravegam, we create with our words, and to be conscious of that. how beneficial is that what I say or have to say. And then svadhyaya pryasanam chaiva, like that we relate when we speak, also in spiritual circles, Srila Prabhupada says that one should at once be able to reference that to a source. If you make statements about spiritual subject matters, you should say it's here, it's there, it's written here, it's written there. So that you don't just come up with concocting things and seeing things also in context. Often we have this phenomena that statements are being quoted out of context. And I would be curious and eager to know this hermeneutics seminar, if this one's will be available somewhere online. Jagannath Baladev Subhacha Devi ki jai, Shri Shri Gauranitai ki jai. So these are principles, like religious principles, that can lead to gentle behavior if we try to embrace all these 5 items at the same time. So non-agitating, truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and related to Shastric statements. That we have these 5 criteria where we had to understand, like, okay, let me as much as possible try to live up to these 4 values. Of course, we also need to check our understanding. What does it mean? For example, truthful. These are words that require a bit purport or pleasing, because pleasing might be connected for people to dishonesty, and truthful might be connected to, it's okay if I'm harsh because it's true. Right? So that we have this in mind. And I would also like to read a bit what Sri Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur says in regards to Krishna's response to Arjuna's question in the 2nd chapter, because in 256 Krishna responds to Arjuna's questions. How does he speak, and how does he sit, how does he talk? He says, the Lord said, when he completely gives up all desires which arise from the mind alone and is satisfied with the soul alone by that mind, he is called Sthita Pragya. This is a Sanskrit term used for the person situated in transcendence or being in bliss. Right? And the purport goes, step by step, Krishna answers each of the 4 questions from this verse until the end of the chapter. Oh no, I was 1 verse 2. The next verse is it. The sage whose mind is not disturbed by the appearance of suffering, who has given up all desire during opportunities for happiness, who is devoid of attachment, fear and anger, is called a Sthita Pragya. So this verse and the next verse, the Lord answers the question, how does he speak? So for us it might not be obvious, how does this verse tell about how a person speaks? Right? He said he has given up desire during opportunities for happiness, who is devoid of attachment, fear and anger. And here he says, his mind is not disturbed by adhyatmika suffering in the form of hunger, thirst, fever or headache, or by the other types of suffering. He says simply that this suffering is his parapta karma, which he must unavoidably endure. So actually he does not lament. Lamentation is often also a sign of the mode of ignorance. Right? Also coming to place, I'm the victim and poor me, helplessness and not taking really responsibility. Okay, if I believe in karma, if I truly believe it, then I'm accountable, and I will endeavor to accept what comes my way, and even if it's difficult. So it said that the Sthita Pragya is someone who is not lamenting. He is devoid of attachment in positive or negative sense. He's also not hankering. He doesn't express like, because in the speech it becomes visible what is a person contemplating about, what is he or she desiring. And then, if someone constantly talks about whatever certain items, like the technology or building or car or this and that, then we see, yes, the mind is circling more around that. There's necessity for certain things, but if you may notice, if someone just like that also likes to talk about these things, there might be, this might be an expression of consciousness. So he says this absence of disgust at a situation is understood by the intelligent person to be the symptom of an undisturbed person. False indifference to suffering, to mark the mark of the impostor, however is understood by the wise man. Such a pretender is called fallen and depraved. So again, pretense is also a mode of ignorance, of course. If you try to artificially be detached, it doesn't work. And the wise people will look through it. You know, it will be obvious if you just try to fake it. So in the face of opportunities for happiness, he is without desire and says to himself and or others that it is simply his parapta karma, which he must tolerate. And the intelligent person recognizes his quality of being devoid of desire for happiness. So let's leave it here. So it's about, again, what you tell yourself and what you tell others. Here in this verse also he says, okay, whatever happens is prarabdha karma. And he doesn't tell it to others in order to appear, yes, I'm very religious, you know, and I accept karma, but internally he has a grudge, oh, God is doing injustice to me. That would be, again, this satyam. He says, no, also to myself I tell the same thing. I don't tell one thing to myself and one thing to others, but this is like identical. You know, it's a big stretch. We not always this level of also of honesty and sincerity we must attain, and sometimes we even don't detect it that we are, you know, not congruent with our, you know, how do we present to the outside? Where do we stand internally? All right. So yes, communication is key, because what I tell myself I also get convinced of at some point. So be careful what you tell yourself. If you tend to be very judgmental about yourself and devalue yourself, you will be like that. You will feel like that. This will be your image. And if you artificially, puff up yourself and like make yourself greater than you are, then you are in an illusion that might at some point heavily drop on your feet. So therefore, satyam priyam hitam chayat, that we have this mentality also of constructiveness. Constructive feedback is a culture we also talk about, that we seek truthful feedback, give truthful feedback. So and that we cultivate a sense of willingness to accept the truth, however unpleasant. So then we move toward like becoming bigger people, because we are like more pure, and it can be it's a very crucial item for conflict resolution. Often, what people fight over is that one person or the other both don't want to acknowledge a certain truth, and we defend the illusions or the lies we tell ourselves. But if one is really truthful and can acknowledge and admit things, no need for conflict. So we can have an eye, be aware of, like, in our lives, where, like, yeah, how much am I willing and able to live up to these 5 items? And if I see, okay, here I lack or here I lack something, then maybe to say, okay, that I commit to one level higher, you know, a bit more of satyam, a bit more of priyam, a bit more of hitam, and so on. Hare Krishna. A few minutes left for if there are comments or questions. So I don't know if there's also online anything.
Prabhu said we have to just tolerate these urges. So what is the difference between tolerating and not just suppressing them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, the tolerating means you allow them to be present, and they're there. You might acknowledge them and give maybe some form also of expression, in terms of you might talk with someone about what's going on for you without like following up on the urge. And suppressing is you try to keep it for yourself, keep it away, you know, and try to ignore it or something. So it's something that needs to be figured out. What we do in the therapy field is we try to find other channels also. That we say creative channel. For example, what I do at the moment a lot is like it's about creative writing. To, let's say your mind is troubled by a lot of anger and maybe sadness and so on, and instead of like putting it away, or before you get into kind of being aggressive to other people, or like to be all kind of passive, you use this process of writing to kind of digest that without kind of wallowing in it, you know, if it comes to some emotional states like that. And other things like physical needs, urges, you can also balance by also, let's say, physical activities like sports, and like how you know, use your energy or productively, like that.
So more observing it, and as long as we are not yet on the Brahma-Bhuta stage, we try to transform it, engage it in a more mode of goodness.
Yeah, yes. And sometimes I think it's also important to accept when we fail to do so. You know, it might be, let's say we talked a lot about conflict, and it might happen, you find yourself again, you kind of freak out and you say things that you actually maybe feel like they were not so nice to say, but you said them anyway. to be willing to be responsible about it, to say, maybe to ask for, or like offer an apology, ask for forgiveness, or rectify situations where you feel I behaved not in a proper way. Because we will fail in our endeavors, we are conditioned souls. Important is the attitude, okay, my aim is to fail less until I don't fail at all. But to be willing in between to, because it can also quickly be that I become again very judgmental about myself and others, because I have maybe ideals that I might not be able to live up to. So to say, okay, I move toward that goal, and in between, if I fail, okay, what helps me to proceed, and where do not just stay with, you know, frustration or judgment, and to also be part of transformation. Make sense?
Yes. One other point. I recognize that today nobody's angry actually. That the people, they are not even angry, they are suppressing this feeling of anger. And we see in verse 1 of Nectar of Instruction, Krishna is saying that we should use this anger to Arjuna to fight, and this energy of anger we can use to do something also constructive, I think. And yeah, what can you say about this? That the people are like that, they're suppressing their feelings, they don't feel anger, they are not laughing, they are not crying, they are just like stones. And last week I felt again this very anger, and I felt so alive, this energy, and you can do something with it.
Yes.
And
that's a good point you mentioned, because feelings means there's living force in it. In all types of feelings, and the more we are disconnected from feelings, the less alive we feel, if you simply disconnect from them. And what people learn often is, first of all, that they learn to not listen to feelings, because it might be dismissed. Also in spiritual circles, that might be a very tricky thing, that we say, okay, certain feelings like anger is a problem, and it becomes a taboo or something to get rid of. Although Srila Prabhupada mentions that there's proper place of anger, and anger is being, also if you look at it closely, also in the Mahabharata, whatever, like people express anger for good reasons. They not suppress it in order to be nice, or to not be unpleasant. So yeah, it's an important thing to allow connection to feelings and to process them, because the more we are disconnected from them, the less we understand any of what's going on. Then we have also a problem to really identify and understand feelings, and they're important messengers as well. For example, when you feel angry, you might also simply be aware of an injustice that happens. And then it's important to be angry, because to acknowledge, hey, here something is wrong. For example, you know about someone gets abused, let's say you know about a physical or sexual abuse, of course you get angry. And up to this anger, you should say there's something needs to be done. You know, it's not like, oh no, I'm not, no, anger is not good. And I try to be whatever, kind and nice, and I should be pleasing. No, there's time for anger. When you said no, now anger is also a force that signals something to someone else. Hey, here what you do is completely off. So, but it has to come also at the same time from a place. Okay, I'm not just staying with the criticism. I'm also willing to help you to do it better. Because it's easy to just say you're wrong and you do this wrong. Another thing is to be there, okay, I show you how to do it right. Or like to help you on your way to get better, you know. That would be more to it than just, because we could tend to become self-righteous. I'm better than you, and I just let you know you're not as good, and bye-bye. Yeah. But another thing is to support a person also, you know, for example, if you have someone who's close to you, to talk about their feelings, or like help them to connect to a feeling, you know. All right? Now we're entering the sphere of overtime.
Yeah. So yeah, I really appreciate the class. Thank you, Prabhu. And I think it's a very relevant topic that we should hear about often also. And one point, just about speech, I keep hearing this again and again also. Bhaktivinoda Tirtha Maharaj and other personalities, they speak about how important the speech is, how much power is there, obviously. So what kind of practical tips do you have to refine speech other than just be Krishna conscious? Because ultimately, yeah, that's the point. But
yes. One thing, if I might pick up on the emotions, often we don't have words for what we feel. And therefore we are often not so able to express ourselves accurately. So one thing we do is also we did this also in our coach training with there was a list of words in terms of adjectives that name feelings or indirect feelings, and to work with them to kind of a bit like, how to say, increase your vocabulary, and try to be a bit more refined and to distinguish, okay, what kind of word would suit, you know. And also, one big part of good communication is listening. Actually, before the talking comes to proper listening. Because if I'm able to truly listen, to absorb, then I'm more conscious. And I can relate to what someone else says more. So communication is actually much more about listening than about talking. So this could be something that we can take with us, because our culture is also a lot about listening. You know, Shravanam, Kirtanam. Of course, the Kirtanam, the person who speaks, must be able to speak, but the listener must be able to absorb, and we both, that we also observe, how do I speak? You know, that I'm aware of where am I clear, where I might be confusing, where am I appropriate in my tone and mood, and where am I maybe off, you know. So self-observance is also something important. Is that something that...
Yeah, like in general, right? Even to hearing while chanting and then hearing Shastra, it's all about this point of learning that, because that helps then to be more conscious, and then you become more Krishna conscious, because there's this sattva guna is increasing, and then also in communication it's like upward spiral.
Yes. And also an important thing might be the process of talking to Krishna, prayer. Learn to speak to express yourself, because sometimes we are uncomfortable. I mean, whom can I talk about this and that? But also learn to talk to Krishna, to really reveal your mind. I once did that usually at the end of the year, it would be time again, to write a letter in hindsight of the year. But it can't also be generally like that if that speaks to you, if you feel like, hey, writing actually, I like that. And what if I just write a letter to Krishna where I reveal my mind? And maybe also there find, because if I have to put things in writing, then I also think of, how could I phrase that? What word would really hit it? You know, and so in this way, learn to express yourself.
You could also beg Krishna that he helps you to find the right words.
Yes, very good approach.
This is my approach mostly.
Yes. Yeah, Krishna says, I'm the ability in man. Yes. Okay. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
You suppressed anger.